Everybody, what a fabulous Tuesday this has been. Well, unless it's been the Tuesday like mine, which was totally unexpected because if you saw the trailer to this show, I have to admit, leading up to the show has been a little crazy. Turns out all that lunar stuff, all that astrological stuff may have merit. We might even talk about it tonight. But until we get there, just know that Tuesday I'm like, oh, it's what do we do when stuff happens? How do we react when stuff happens? Well, I've had a full day of it, and I know you're going to hear more right after we run our open.
Okay, Jess, it's all yours.
I'm telling you, Scott. You saw this morning, right before Ray's show, I was on at the last second, and there was a really good reason for that. And then right as the show starts, and I'm going to say this publicly, my dog, Bailey, as beautiful and wonderful as she is, here I am muted. Poor Ray, if I was making faces in the comments or as he was talking, it had nothing to do with him because I sit down, we get on the air, and all of a sudden, poor Bailey, something is wrong with her belly, and she starts throwing up all over the floor in my office. And it's not just one spot, it's everywhere. So once we get off air, I'm able to go ahead and clean that up. But that was just the start of my day, and it has continued every single second of every single minute of every single hour. So it's been a crazy one, and this is a perfect environment, the perfect setting for us to talk about when stuff happens. How about you, Scott?
Well, you know something. You and I are on the same page, but we're entirely in different maybe in different universities or something. Because I have been preparing for this show by thinking about not the immediate, but rather the long term. And I thought that we might share a little bit of that tonight too.
Let's just start right there.
Okay, I'll pick up the ball and run with it, and then you can do the best you can for repairs afterwards.
I don't think repair isn't necessarily the right word, but
Oh,
I know.
you haven't heard where I'm planning on taking this yet, Jess.
You know what? It's you, Scott. We, all of us watching, have no doubt. Let's go!
Okay. Well, so I wanted to kind of set the table in terms of where I'm thinking this season might go with the Just Plus Scott Plus You show, and see how it pans out. So last week we focused on the me first, the supreme unselfishness, which is our theme, and I go along with that entirely. I also think that we are in a period of transition nowadays, and it's something that I promised myself that I would look very closely at when I was in early on in college. So this is a promise I made myself in the early 1970s. And in the early 1970s, there was end days movement that was going on, and a charismatic movement in the Christian sector and so forth. And that really intrigued me. So I studied it a lot. And uh, in the end days, it doesn't mean that the Earth was going to end. It just meant that it was going to transfer from whatever it was in the past to whatever it's going to be in the future. And there's a fork in the road, and you can, go one way or the other. And I'm an optimist, so I think that we're going to go in, a very positive way. But, they talked about things like a third of the earth and the third of the water and the third of the air would be polluted. They talked about plagues. They talked about wars and rumors of wars. And none of that was really there on any big scale. And also another prediction was that there would be enhanced communications. So almost all of the things I put on my checklist of around the turn of the century, and it was, well, it's going to probably be a little after the turn of the century. All of those things that are on that checklist have come to be. So what the heck is going on? Well, we're going from either the Industrial Revolution or some might think it's the communications era into a new one where, it was something that was manual up until the 1980s. The computers have taken over society, and now this internet and this online thing is taking over. And I'm of the opinion that it isn't going to take very long for us to be in an entirely new situation. And the power structure is going to be different. And it's all because of Hang Us on Air. Now, that might be a little bit of hyperbole, but this represents the shift in power, doesn't it?
Oh, you know what? That's not. I was preparing some comments and I was preparing some thoughts, and go figure, when stuff happens, you throw me a curveball and I'm like, what just happened? Okay, so let's start right there.
All right. Your
I
turn.
do I love Scott, how you totally and completely continue to fully drink the Kool-Aid of Google Plus, for lack of a better description, in the sense that what your experience is here is very forward thinking, is very kind, is very generous, is very reciprocal. And I see all of that too. I also see that there are always going to be the people who are looking for the edge. There are always going to be the people that are looking for the edge of of whatever they can take advantage of. What's my advantage? How am I going to stay out on top? What am I going to do to be that top dog? Or if we're in Trina Paulus's world, that top caterpillar at the top of the caterpillar pillar, right? And I think you're right. I think that we have a big shift. I think we have a big shift where more people, in terms of that traditional thinking, I think that's changing right now. And I don't know if it's because of Google Plus, and I would love to give Google and Google Plus all of the credit for that. Totally would. I'm also wondering, though, if it's in a time in our life where we've been in this transition for a lot of years. I think my entire lifetime so far, we started this transition before my lifetime, and we're in it, and it's coming to this place where it's, you know what? I can't say that phrase. Well, I could, but I'm not going to say that phrase. Something like, well,
I can't
you
help
know,
you out. I don't know what you're meaning.
that's okay. You're either going or you're not. You're on the sidelines or you're in.
Okay. Got
Okay?
it.
But it kind of has to do, well, and I don't know. We don't even need to guess it. It's
Oh,
but
I know. I know exactly what
you
you
know,
mean, and I,
okay.
I applaud you for moving on. Everyone knows what you're talking about.
Oh, that totally, so I love the idea that we're at this place, this crux in time, and we have a choice. And the other thing that I'm seeing, Scott, and yes, you're talking bigger and broader scopes, but I think our reactions, what we're seeing, I don't know if you want to call it karma, I don't know if you want to call it something else, but when we do something, the response is immediate, right? The saying, what goes around comes around, used to take people a lifetime. Sometimes I can see instantaneous when I do something. When I do something that has a consequence, good or bad, sometimes I find out in seconds or minutes or hours instead of years or tens of years, which I find fascinating.
It used to be that you could tell where a person grew up by their accent within 2 miles, and it was because they would never travel more than a mile or two from where they were born. And in London, it was you could even take it within a few blocks sometimes that the things changed so little. And during the American Revolution, if something happened, it would be 2.5 weeks before, someone would write it down on paper, and then it'd be 2.5 weeks before it'd be disseminated throughout the colonies, something like that. And one of the things I was going to comment on is that if you looked at the power structure then, just in terms of distribution of wealth, it was like a hockey stick. So you had lots of people, and then you had, just a very few people who were very wealthy. It was the Hudson Bay Trading Company and the royalty, the King George and all those folks invested very heavily in that company. So that was one of the things that spurred on this revolutionary thing called democracy, where there was more transparency. Well, guess what's happening right now? We've got the same distribution of money, of power, and it's kind of like a hockey stick. Now, how long is that going to be able to sustain when our self-image is that we have a middle class and it's more like a bell curve? So I'm very optimistic that there'll be great upheavals, and one of the reasons why I think that might happen is if you take a look at the power of computing, it used to be in mainframes, and then, the rest of us might have dumb terminals, and that's flipped on its head. The computers that we have at our hands, and now the smartphones, are so very powerful that the establishment, the whatever it is that we have to connect us is provided to us, but the power now resides in our hands. So the ability for transparency, for us to talk without having to go through intermediaries, I think is going to make a big change. And
Okay.
I'll let you comment on that, and then I can go take things to the next step.
Sure. And I, I'm just gonna open my mouth and words are gonna start coming out in just a minute because stuff happens and they floated right in a bubble around the room.
Do you want me to do you want me to
No,
carry on?
it's okay. I'm totally cool with this. I was going to take somewhat of a right turn or a left turn or maybe go under or over. The idea being, yes, okay, so I want to think about this when stuff happens and you talk about democracy and you talk about transparency and you talk about this ability for upheaval, and I'm all for disruption, and in fact I think it's necessary. But the more transparency we have, and the lower the barrier to entry to things that could allow for disruption, make it harder for any one voice or any one cause to be heard. And so I'm wondering, as neat as that is, how does the change in technology actually support changing this hockey stick to this bell curve that you're talking about, specifically in relationship to, okay, the barrier to entry is lower, so we don't need the money to have the disruption. But we have so many disparate voices that even when a portion of us get together under a singular voice, it's still not as loud as it was once because it took a whole lot of voices to be heard and to actually cause the disruption in the past. Now we can have many little disruptors.
Well, all right. I'll take it to the next level then.
Let's go.
I am of the opinion that the baby boomers grew up during the 1960s, and I think you've heard this theory before, Jess. And we were all idealistic, and we thought that we could change the world and make things better and whatnot. And then the Vietnam War ended, and the draft ended, and that took the oxygen out of the air. That just took the steam out of the movement, and we got married and we got kids and we got mortgages and life happened. So a lot of us who were idealistic in the 1960s are now thinking about retirement. We're now thinking more about legacy, and we want the world to be better for our kids and so forth. And we are in a position of power, relative power, more so than when we were, young kids just out of high school, that type of thing. So I see that as a real force for change and for good, for the better. And then I also take a look at the youth of today, and what hope do they have? They see water being polluted, they see job prospects, nebulous. They don't have the security of a single job or career. They're going to have 7 careers. They're going to be learning. I mean, it's exciting, but it's a very scary place that they're in. So they you know they don't have an investment in keeping the status quo, returning to the 1980s or the 1990s. It's forward looking and utilizing this technology. And then there are those who are in the middle, and they too want to have what's best for their kids and for their own retirement. um, so I think that there will be a coalition of a lot of different voices or a lot of different opinions coming together, and the opportunity for that to be in a forward-looking, positive way. If we can do something right, if we can start saving the environment, if we can start eating more healthy food, if we can pay more attention to our health, all of these sorts of things is just going to result in a choice between good and less than good. And people will eventually choose good. Somewhere along the line, big data is going to come in, and this really scares me because it's a tool. It's agnostic, can be used for good or can be used for bad. But man, if you just aggregate all of the data points that are out there and be able to come up with some solutions, I just think that's great. And it all kind of ties back to this mysticism because there were like 22 different predictions about the end of the world around this period of time. From the Aztecs to the Tibetans to Christians and the Jewish faith, all of those sorts of things. So you don't have to look there to say what's specific. All you have to do is to look to that to say, there's got to be something going on.
And for those of you just joining us, this is the Jess and Scott and You Show. We are talking about when stuff happens. And as usual, Scott does not disappoint, and he took us out into the universe, and we have been having this fabulous listen to some of his thoughts and ideas, and we can actually see we're learning a little bit about Scott and some of his ideas. And I'm just sitting on the sidelines going, okay, I like this. And jumping back into the conversation, one of the things I hear is, technology is allowing this to happen. What if this conscious choice happens to just be a coincidence to the technology we have available? What if this shift that we're talking about is actually something that we as a collective energy and the energy beings that allow us to be connected together have decided is time for? The universe is saying, step up, and we're either going to or we're not. And cool, we have technology to help us make those choices. We have technology to help us find the information we want to decide what's good or not good for us, and then the more good or not goods for us gather together, and technology assists in that. But I don't know if technology is the sole reason for that. If we're going to stay out here, that's where I would take this conversation. And while you're thinking about that, Scott, we have a quote from Kristen. A shift in consciousness begins with the access to greater distribution of communication tools. We also have a quote from Stephanie Sims. While I agree that easier and cheaper methods of communication should lead to more transparency, I'm wondering if what hasn't changed is human nature, meaning that some people will always try to appear to be something that they're not, especially if they see some advantage, monetarily or in relationship to power, for themselves.
So all of these are subjects that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the season, and we have some guests lined up who have just blown me away when I've seen them and heard what they had to say. And it's putting a little bit of an edge, or it's putting a little bit more fuller bloom on the flower in terms of talking about marketing and business and our relationship to our families and our community. But there is a shift in community, and so that's essentially where I was taking it.
A shift in community. Okay, because I was going to go right to the selfish part of us. We have a choice. And in our choice, we get to decide how we show up. So I bypassed community. Sorry, Scott. But
yeah, no, that's good because I wanted to go down that path as well. So I'm glad you're doing it, and then I'll have a rebuttal.
All right. Well, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a monologue here. I do think when we take the time to make choice and to know that we have a choice, even when we don't think we have a choice, we do have a choice. We're just choosing to see no choices, or choosing to see only one path, or choosing to see the path of least resistance, which makes me wonder about complacency. Because if I'm thinking about putting myself first, I have to be diligent. And by the way, when I say me and I in this case, I'm talking about each of us as an individual, not me personally. I have to. I oh now I lost it because I made the clarification. Do you understand where I was going, Scott?
Um, yeah, I think so.
Okay, well I was hoping you would pick it up, but I
Yeah,
since mine is gone.
and I'm going to pick it up. I was just framing my thoughts because let's see how yeah, and now I've lost it. So
All
that's
right.
why.
Then I'll take it back. While I know, isn't this funny? See when stuff happens, and this is the kind of thing totally related to the purpose of the show tonight. Was let's just talk about when stuff happens, and we can take it out into the universe, and we can have a big dialogue. But in the end, it's happening to us right now. There's this weirdness that is occurring. So let's put ourselves first, and how do we own our choices for that? Does that help get back to where you were going, Scott?
Okay. Well, I think the part of the topic was, I am saying things are going to turn out for the best, and there are those in the comment stream I've seen, and you've alluded to the fact that we're all, that we're also selfish, and that not everyone is going to be acting in the best interest of the whole. They'll be acting in their own best interest. So to that, what I would say is that if you believe the propaganda, if you believe David Amerlin for example, when you have transparency, when you have sunlight, the sunlight is a disinfectant, and so when business is conducted in public, and when you have checks and balances, people will naturally see that it is in their best interest to behave better in public and in their dealings with others, because they will not be able to hide quite as easily. They'll be exposed, and and there are others who just will relish at the thought of being. We all want to leave the world better than we found it, and we all want to. Almost all of us want to have our children have a better world than what we came in, and so forth. So you can argue with me, but I think most people want to do good, especially if in doing good they're not going to be chumps. And with the new technology that we have here, we can all form together to be collaborative on projects, and then we dissipate, and then we come together differently. And if you want to play, then it's a matter of putting your best foot forward and aspiring to your highest self.
Okay, so you came full circle because you started saying, you know what? Everybody looks out for their own best interest. And in the end, you said we all look out for each other. And I think that there is an inherent double-edged sword thinking about my best interest. If I say I'm doing this because it's in my best interest, people listening to me or overhearing me and not understanding the context of it, or not even stopping to think, in our society today, we assume, the assumption is, we're doing it at the detriment to other people around us. And so one of the things I really want to talk about is that my best interest can not only be my best interest, but it could be my best interest in serving other people around me and giving to the world and having more in the world, in the if you want to call it love, if you want to call it kindness, if you want to call it compassion, whatever that is, heart-centered, heart-led, all those things I think come into play. But they can't if we're not willing to step up and say, I've got to do things for my best interest. And until I do that, I can't give to anybody else. And that's not a bad thing at all.
Well, I thought you were going. I'm going to speak for a little bit so that you can check out some of the comments. I think people in the audience know that I find if I try and do comments, then I just lose it. So you're the
Oh,
one
don't worry,
who's
I'm on it. You don't have to worry about that at all.
kind of on that to bring those in.
Okay.
One of the paths I thought you were going down is George Green's higher agreement that that we can enter into a higher agreement with those people who are important to us, and he's more eloquent in this than what I am, and then it actually turns out to be in our mutual best interest, as opposed to something that would be more of a zero-sum game or a win-lose game or
Well,
that.
there's always going to be perception. And in the form of perception, we can do our best to meet people where they are. And sometimes we succeed, and sometimes we don't. And in the cases that we don't, bending ourselves to somebody else's will when it is a detriment to us is not a win, it is a mutual loss. Whereas I don't think we have to look at bending by saying no and taking a stand. I mean, heck, if that makes us seem whatever it makes us seem and whatever the response is by somebody else, I'm okay realizing that I can't bend to them. And no matter what I say was not going to make them happy anyway, so I'm actually coming out at a sum zero by holding my ground. Because I would rather come out at a zero than try and give when there's no chance of any net gain.
So now, you've done that wonderfully because you've brought it back to ground zero, which is our theme for the entire season. And that's me first, supreme unselfishness.
That's right. And so here we go. We've got a few quotes to share. The first is from Amen. All right, Amen Johns. Isn't all the predictions around the end really that the self-important generation are facing mortality and can't bear the thought of the world continuing much if they had never been? What? I really like your comment. And then here's another quote from George Green. Technological and human evolution are parallel and interrelated. I'm not in disagreement with that, but I do think humans would evolve in spite of ourselves, not because of advances in technology.
And I would say technology is going so much faster than human evolution, not the physical evolution, but the cultural, maybe spiritual, that we're just running to catch up to try and figure out how we can get a new equilibrium given the new technologies. And that's why we all feel so disrupted nowadays, because things are disrupted.
I find that really interesting. Wow, maybe I live in a cave and I don't even know it because when I when I look at technology, I don't see us running to catch up. I see us inventing and innovating, and I see the people that are on the edge doing the inventing and the innovating actually creating a space of curiosity and an opportunity for the rest of us to step into our own if we choose. And the fact that we don't goes back to the whole idea of complacency or sedentary, being these, we sit more than we move. We're not doing all of these things that our bodies were meant to be, and maybe, just maybe, all this technology, like I said, in spite of ourselves, I think if we moved more, I think if we had less technology, I think we would possibly still be, and we would possibly still be in the same place of this karmic, the instant response, the opportunity to know that our choices reach farther than ourselves, and really having to think about, how do I show up in the world to be additive and supportive and out of love? Because that's really where fulfillment and spirituality would come from.
Okay. I'm I'm going to watch that in replay, Jess.
Did I just do a whole big run-on sentence or something?
Well, you did, and I'm not sure I captured all of that, but I sure enjoyed it. So I'm going to check that in replay for sure.
Okay, here's a quote from Pam Barroway. Choices are more powerful when you have a cup half full outlook. The cup half empty worldview stifles creativity, sharing, movement in any direction.
That is so true.
Okay, and this is actually probably a good time, the stifling part. Are we stifled or are we not? I think this is a good segue into the shout about. What do you think, Scott?
I think that would be a great idea. So, Everyone, if you're new this season, we have replaced the +2 takeaway with Jess's the shot about. And I'll just go right into it if you like, unless you want to set it up more.
I think we should just go. This is a
Okay,
good
here we
one.
go.
Sing along.
1, 2, 3, 4, get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great. 9, gonna shine, life is good. I'm doing fine. 10, gonna do it right and do it big, yeah, yeah. I look into the sky with all the beautiful color, but there's more than just for me.
Let's break some rules tonight. I'm going to challenge you. Yes, I'm going to challenge you. One of my friends, Phil Boyer, wrote a book called Coloring Outside the Lines. Now, why is this important? It's important because it's about creating valuable, unique content and sharing information in a way that hasn't been shared yet. Why does that matter? It matters because any content that is already out there, being shared in a lot of different ways, allows us to use our creative juices if we choose. Yeah, you heard me right, if we choose. In the book, Coloring Outside the Lines, what Phil Boyer does is he challenges you. He challenges you to actually look at yourself in addition to everything that you're hearing. Because in the world today, I mean, if we come right down to it, we're really busy. And while I hate that word, I really hate that word busy. And when I start using that word busy, I know my schedule is a little too full and I'm a little overcommitted. And that's a total tangent, and you'll probably see that on another Shout About. Tonight, though, we're talking about the ability to be creative and to be truthful and honest. Because when we are honest with ourselves, whether it's sitting here together like we are right now, whether it's connecting over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or whether it's just a random video call or email because we were thinking about each other and wanted to say hello, every single one of those things gets our creative juices going. So take the time to check out what rule-breaking ideas is all about and what coloring outside of the lines can do for you. I took a very hard challenge in coloring outside the lines. I asked 5 people very near and dear to me to think long and hard and be really thoughtful and honest and tell me what my strengths and my weaknesses were. And if you want to find out more about that, ping me and we can talk about it because it takes a lot of courage. So what can you do to break some rules and color outside the lines?
$1 million like a kid to pay dirt. Trying to smile from ear to ear, the kind that makes a face hurt. And we'll laugh, jump, sing loud, not afraid to shout about being happy, living it out. Take a look and see a beautiful morning.
And for those of you who don't know, yes, I recorded those on 2 screens. And yes, you are looking at my co-host who did the open, the close, and does all of the editing. So thank you for that, Scott.
You're so welcome. It was fun.
They are fun. Every time I listen to that, I have to dance. It's quite a fun song.
We should put a link to the entire song in the comment stream sometime, shouldn't we?
I think we should. I'm wondering, to go back to our conversation, so for those of you tuning in now, we are talking about when stuff happens. And we've been talking on a very big, universal, humanitarian level scale about how we're all interconnected and how technology helps, among other things. I'd like to bring it back down and, maybe we should just talk about some practical examples of how do we handle the chaos. Because, today, for example, I kept throwing stuff out. I was telling Scott this. I kept throwing stuff out and I couldn't keep up. The stuff that I threw out made everything else took longer. So, and I was actually telling George Green this today too. I was like, so I took everything out so I could be on time to the things that I kept because everything was taking so much longer and it was pretty unexpected, and I didn't feel overwhelmed and I wasn't late anywhere, so I didn't put the stress on myself. The downside is I put all the stuff I took out until tomorrow, so I'm wondering if I should have just taken it off the table altogether. And that's one of the things, so when we think about stuff happening, there's a real chaos there. I have choices, and I'm making choices in the moment. And when we think about the choices in the moment and we think about, do I keep it or do I not? Do I reschedule or do I not? How do I handle myself and make sure I'm taking care of myself so I can make it through the day? How do you handle with some of the chaos like that when it's instantaneous insanity?
I'll start broad and then get very, very specific and very real. Broadly speaking, Jess, the the rise in productivity that larger companies have been able to enjoy due to technology through the 1980s, 1990s, and so forth are now in our hands. So, for example, if I have a timesheet that I want to keep track of my time, there are apps out there, there's software out there, cloud-based capabilities out there that allow me to very easily do that. And then a push of a single button, and I have every minute that I've tracked taken care of. Now that takes a little bit of discipline to get into that groove, but I'm able to do in mere minutes something that sometimes would have taken previously might have taken hours to do. Paying bills online, those sorts of things. So
So we reduce the amount of time it takes using technology so we could fill up our extra time with more technology and be busier than ever before?
yeah, exactly right. We are now so much more productive than we were before. I've been thinking deeply recently about the skills in middle school that kids are supposed to learn, and then if they learn those skills in middle school, they can perfect them in high school, and then they're set for college and for life. And the real value of middle school is that it's time management, and it is prioritization, and it's study habits. And if you don't, if you have those skills down, technology or not, then you'll be able to cope and compete in this world. And if you don't have those skills down, then you'll go off and do something else, but you won't be absorbing the flow of information and being able to handle it quite so well. It's just that now in adulthood, it's not just middle school or high school or college. It is lifelong learning, and it is right now ever increasing number of online tools to help us manage the greater volume of information and communications that we have to cope with. Did that answer your question?
It was an answer, and I think it was a good answer.
Okay, well, thanks.
And I liked where you took that. I also like that you shared a few things about what are the new norms. What are the new norms that those of us who didn't have technology have to learn to continue to stay relevant? And I think that's important. And I actually think it's going to change much more often and become much more necessary for our kids and the kids that come after those kids to become adaptable and to be able to experience the world in a way that supports that. I wouldn't have broken it down into things like time management or study habits or any of that kind of stuff because, yeah, well, I don't fit into the traditional categories of any of that, and I'm okay with that. But here's the thing: we all have to decide what our box is, and if we run up against the edges of our own box, it's really not big enough. So you may say you have an octagon, but you don't know until you hit the edges. You may say you have no box, but you really don't know until you hit the edges, because we all have that. And so thinking about how we limit ourselves knowingly and unknowingly just because of who we are and what we're trying to achieve, like when stuff happens. When stuff happens, I tend to move to doubt. When stuff happens, I tend to move away from my love of the uncertain and who knows what's going to come next. Yes, I have a to-do list, and by the way, there are columns of to-dos behind all of these sticky notes. But look at my to-do list, right? This is in a glimpse of my brain, and I think that we have to figure out what that works for us, because when all of this is changing, it's part of our job to figure out how to be different. When we are so much alike, I mean, we're a lot alike. We have a lot of the same genes, we have a lot of the same DNA, yet our personalities are very different. Yet Yeah. Wow, Scott, thank you for the look on your face. But the idea.
Thankfully, we don't have a film strip this time.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, that would have been
The
really
look on my
cool.
face.
The look on your face was priceless. The idea being, though, that even everybody who's joining us, everybody who joins us and who listens in, we're enough the same that it's easy to stay the same as everybody else. And it takes a lot of guts to step out and really be different. And it takes a lot of guts to take what we learn and really move to the fringes and allow other people to go, okay, yeah, which the people we know, not only is it courage, it gives other people permission. We can lead by example. We can be in it every day, or we can choose to just be lost. We can be lost in it, or we could be acting in it. Maybe it's a better way to say it.
Yeah.
There were a lot of it's in there.
We're in tumultuous times, and in tumultuous times there's great opportunities, and I think that we have now set the stage in terms of the energy and maybe even in terms of the content for the rest of the season, because we've got things lined up that are specifically around small businesses and entrepreneurs, but in a new age and a new way of doing things, and with a new mindset that really allows us to become more powerful in ourselves and in our world than we've ever had an opportunity to be before. So I think it's optimistic. I'm really looking forward to the weeks and months ahead, Jess.
Me too. Me too. And I tell you what, small businesses and what did you say, entrepreneurs? Did you actually say solopreneur? Did I imagine that?
You imagined it.
Okay, cool. I think we need to also work on a new name for these groups of people. As much as they're fitting, I think they're limiting. So, but that is another show, not on When Stuff Happens with Jess and Scott and you, the Y and JSY. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.